Hello everyone, my name is AJ, and I don't have a good intro. A few weeks ago I made a video criticizing Hazbin Hotel's colors. To demonstrate my points, I made recolors of all the characters where I either reduced the amount of colors in a character's palette to make them easier to draw, or I shifted the balance of colors so that they would stand out more against the rest of the cast. And that video blew up. I was expecting maybe 2,000 views, maybe, if I was lucky, and I actually hadn't tried very hard, but it got 23,000 views on a video that I didn't try on. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be going through some of the criticisms that I received and fix some of the mistakes that I made. I'm going to start with the most common comment I got. This one was actually like in support of me, I guess. It was like a very general critique of VivziePop's work, and that comment was too much red, and you know what? That's not fully wrong. Vivzie has been criticized heavily for making all of the characters very red, but I think boiling down the problem with the colors to being just too much red is inaccurate, a little misleading, and devoid of nuance. Also, it gets kind of annoying after the 30th time of that comment being posted. While I do think there is far too much red here in the cast, I think the reason why this particular show is so egregious with the amount of red is because of the backgrounds. A lot of the backgrounds are also very red, which makes this issue appear worse than it is. Here's all of the major characters on top of one of Hazbin's backgrounds, and now here's a few different versions of the background where it isn't as red, and you can see that the problem isn't quite as bad as some people make it out to be. There's still the issue of a lot of the characters being too red. There is still too much red, but I don't think eliminating the red is the solution here. I've seen lots of people in some of the critiques that I've watched personally remove red entirely from the characters' palettes, and I just don't think that's necessary or correct. Now I'm going to move on to the criticisms that were made of my recolors. It seemed like everyone pretty much agreed that my changes to Charlie, Angel Dust, and Sarah were good and correct. Angel Dust and Sarah just needed their palettes simplified because they already stand out enough on their own. No further changes to their palettes were necessary. I changed Charlie's pants to a dark brown so that they would be more similar to the original pilot, which makes her easier to look at and matches the more mellow parts of her personality. Emily also got mostly positive reception. I simplified her palette as much as I could, but I did make one mistake which someone pointed out to me. I removed the cyan of her eyes because it was only used once, but the cyan conveys her actual energy better, so I am in agreement with said commenter. It's back now. I still don't like one-use colors though. Sometimes they have their place. I still don't think this is one of those instances though. So to try and tie that cyan into the design more, I made her a second pair of wings cyan as well. If I was willing to change more, I would make all of her blues lean towards cyan more, but I want to change as little about the designs as possible while still adjusting them so that they are either simpler or work better when they're next to each other, except for when I don't do that, because these recolors are for my self-indulgent project. I do care what you think, but I don't care that much. The other characters that don't really need to be addressed would be Velvet and Valentino. I did get one person that didn't particularly like Valentino, but I think they look decent enough. They're not super major characters in the thing that I'm writing, so I'm not particularly concerned with them. Their designs are actually fairly solid. There were a few people that had problems with the changes that I made to Husk. I believe the comment that I'm thinking about specifically said that he looked like he just had an overlay on him, or that he was under different lighting. To that, I'm just gonna have to say it's gonna remain a difference of personal preference. I just prefer warmer, softer browns. And, you know, since red is such a prominent color in all of the main cast, I think, tying, red tones into Husk was a good decision to make him, really feel like he fits with the rest of the cast without over-accentuating the red itself. Because, you know, you can add red tones without adding red, the color, into there. Moving on, I made a criticism of Vaggie, pointing out that the thing around her waist blends in with her skin. To fix this and reduce her palette a little, I switched out the pink for the same braid that's in her hair, and somehow didn't notice that the waist thing blends in even more than it already did until somebody pointed it out to me. Whoopsie, that was my fault. That was entirely my fault. So I changed it to white and made the hair directly behind her gray to simulate shadows so that nothing's blending in with each other. Another common criticism that I got was with what I did to Adam. I got rid of the one-use yellow on his wings and used the color of his sleeves instead. Most people pointed out that now his wings and sleeves blend together, and yes, I could see this being an issue for an animated show that doesn't utilize a lot of shading and has fairly thin line art, but these recolors are strictly for my use. I'm not trying to fix the show. There are too many issues to fix. The foundation itself is flawed, almost beyond repair. I still like the show, by the way, just to be clear, I'm not a hater. I usually get around this issue with shading, wing positioning, and just generally thicker line art. Here's a few of my drawings of him that were used in the final product. While there are a few pieces here that you could still make that criticism of, ultimately getting rid of that color simplifies things so much for me that it's worth it. There was also someone who didn't really like the changes I made to his face, specifically in terms of how much I saturated the skin. To that person, I don't care. There's also this fairly common comment that I get every time I talk about Adam's face, and this comment is that Adam is based off of Alex Brightman, and you people are wrong. Even if that technically is true, this is the worst drawing of Alex Brightman I've ever seen in my entire life. It looks nothing like him. Not all brown-haired white boys are Alex Brightman. This just happens to be voiced by him. While I'm at it, I'm going to address the people who didn't like that I saturated Lute's skin. They said that Lute's skin should be kept pale because goth people tend to be very pale, and I get where you're coming from, but the issue with that is that her skin color is blending into her hair color because they are exactly the same color. The only difference would be like in her original design, she has like this very light purple strand separating her hair from her face, but that color is so similar that without the line art, it would blend in entirely. She's still very pale, she's just not impossibly bright white anymore. There was also someone who didn't like that I took all of the blue out of her uniform because they're like supposed to represent the police, and the blue makes them look more like the police. What? I barely changed it. I have never seen a police uniform in this shade of blue. And frankly, to be honest, to me it looks gray, not blue. I only changed it as an ease of drawing thing for me, specifically because this gray is one that I use frequently and already have saved, so I don't need to take the extra time to drop in her reference every time I need to use her color or take up an extra slot to save it, one of which would slow me down and the other would ruin my system. Also, I think you're crazy and weird, and I do not wish to interact with you. Like, I don't even know how you make that connection. There were some people who didn't like my changes to Lucifer. Lucifer actually had the most unnecessary colors out of everyone in the cast. A lot of people looked at Emily and Sarah as having the most colors, but this is incorrect. Emily has 15 colors, Sarah has 11, and Lucifer has a staggering 18. He was by far the most difficult one to simplify, and as we all know, there's too much red. So getting rid of his dark red and reusing his dark brown was an obvious step for me, and I like the way it looks. I know that this is hell and that Lucifer is the sin of pride and all that, but let's also not forget that he's a fallen angel and he doesn't belong here. The red is still present, I just reduced it. Being mostly white already made him stand out in the cast, but since most of the characters already have red present in them, getting rid of his particular red will allow other characters more leeway to have red in their designs. Remember, this is about all of the characters together, not just one. Including the brown also gives him more ties to Charlie with her brown pants. There's also this theory floating around that I actually believe where Lucifer is white like an apple core and Charlie is red like a full apple. This theory is also supported by Lucifer wearing a red suit in a picture that's supposedly from before he was depressed. So having less red in his design also adds to that symbolism. Moving on to Alistair, people didn't like how I changed his skin for a multitude of reasons. I'm going to quickly shut down the very stupid criticism that people make every time I criticize how light his skin is. I know that sometimes mixed people come out a little bit lighter. I'm mixed. I look like milk toast. I'm Hispanic on government forms only. Meanwhile, my brother is darker than our father who gave us the melanin in the first place. He stole all of it from me. I'm aware. However, Alistair's hair is straight, and his nose is not a shape that would indicate to the viewer what his race is. There's also nothing in the show to hint at his culture being anything other than what his skin tone indicates. white. I did not know through the entire show that Alistair was supposed to be Creole. I did not find that out until I studied him for my full redesign and rewrite of him. That's not good. You can't just say that a character is of a race and then not give them any traits to indicate that. That's not representation, that's called lying. You did nothing and expect people to pat you on the back for it. At least when Disney is doing lazy representation, the character actually looks like their race. This just doesn't pass the sniff test for me. So in order to make sure his race comes across better without making any actual changes to the actual design or the writing, I made his skin darker. I know it's the lazy way out, but it's better than what Vivzy gave us. Now for the actual criticism. Several people pointed out that this new skin tone doesn't contrast enough with his hair, and I didn't want to admit this at first. Going grayscale, they looked like they had enough contrast for me, but the thing is, while that works just fine in black and white, the actual colors do mess with your eyes a little bit. So yes, more changes did need to be made. I agree with the people that say his entire color palette needs to be reworked, but I also want to change as little as possible about the colors themselves. I want the spirit to remain the same for most of the major characters. Side characters, I'm not as pearl clutchy about that, because frankly they don't really matter that much. I'm not going to be adding any new colors in, and I'm going to try and keep the original conceptualization as similar as possible. I broke this rule later with side characters, don't worry about it. This is what we have now. I made his sleeves dark like his pants, I've reused his third lightest red for his hair and the shoulder parts of his coat, which I really like, and I think he's good now. It's not perfect, but this is Alistair we're talking about, he can't be fixed. If you want to see my full redesign of him, where I don't hold back on changing him and make him actually look good, there's a playlist on my channel called The Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies. That one's the AU I actually care about. This one is stupid fluff that I make for fun. The other one will actually be good. Difty and Penchus were both a miss. I don't know what I was thinking, and I don't like these. I remember being really tired when I made these two, and I kind of just wanted to be done, so I rushed through them in a way that was detrimental to them. I made them worse, so I completely started over. This time what I decided to do was actually to add in a different color. Since we already have Alistair and Charlie as mostly red characters, I really wanted to change the balance so that Nifty wasn't so red, but there weren't enough colors in her design to actually make that happen in a way that looked good. So this time I decided to take some inspiration from my own full Nifty redesign and stole her main orange. I used that orange for her hair and used the brighter orange she already had for her dress. I did have to I had to brighten this color up later because it didn't look good with the rest of the cast, since a lot of the colors that are used in Hazbin Hotel are very bright, and I usually use a lot more desaturated, more natural looking colors in my own art. I kept the red for her eye, cheeks, and blood spots. I did decide to take the poodle off her dress since it's a detail that's extremely difficult to animate and also doesn't have anything to do with her character. I switched it out for more blood marks that would be easier to animate and ties that color down into her skirt. For Penchus, I actually decided not to change too much. I tried a few different combinations of colors, but in the end I realized that he was perfect the entire time. Instead, what I did this time was I lightened up his lightest yellow a tad. I know that this makes the brightness problem I complained about worse, but I actually like it better, and that's what matters to me. I also got rid of his darker yellow so we'd have one less color to worry about. Vox was an absolute miss, the worst one of that entire video. I absolutely hate this. I wish I had never put it into the world. My goodness, what a terrible recolor. I do still stand by a few of my points though. I think the red striped shirt looks bad and his suit top and pants need more contrast. This time I changed his suit coat to a black like his old design. I think the blue screen looked bad, so this time I kept the grayish blue and got rid of his dark blue. I do miss the dark blue, but I just couldn't find a way to make it work. I leaned more into the cyans of his palette instead. I had to add in a new color, which makes me nervous because now I'm worried I'm not gonna like this in a few days, but to be completely honest, I'm not a Vox fan, and I don't like his design. I think he looks boring. I think he acts boring. I don't like anything about him. I think he was a huge waste of screen time. He's the most useless of the Vs. The only reason I can even start to conceive for people liking him is because he's Alistair's ex-boyfriend or something. I hate this character. I'm sorry. I don't hate anyone that likes this character, to be clear. It's fine if you like things that I don't. I can't believe we live in a world where that needs to be said. I just don't get it. If you want to see me do an actually good redesign, please check out the Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies. Everything about that series is better and reminds me that I can actually be a good artist sometimes. Now, I want this to be my last video about the designs for the characters and an arrangement was made, so there's really only two major characters that need changes, and that is Abel and Eve. Starting with Abel because he's got clip art now, so I don't have to draw anything. I really thought this one would be easy, just change the skin tone and be done. I was wrong. This is another design that looks like it doesn't have very many colors, but actually has a lot when you actually color pick from it, so I simplified that. His eyes are a one-use color, and I do not like one-use colors, as I'm sure you are all aware of by now, so I reused that color for his wings. I know somebody is going to say, oh, but his wings are supposed to be the same as his dad's. I don't want to hear it. I know. Sometimes I'm aware of information and I don't care. I shouldn't be writing this when I'm tired. I'm going to be putting so much unnecessary anger into this stupid script. I made his skin tone darker for lore reasons related to do with Eve. I also put some dark roots into his hair to indicate that his hair is dyed. It is not naturally blonde. I actually reused the same color I used for Adam's hair for that. Even with all the colors I added or changed, my palette is still smaller than Vivzi's. That should give you a clue as to how bad she is at just simplifying her colors. Now, Eve is a character that I have to design entirely from scratch, since this is the only image that we have of her. So I want to keep this as accurate as I can, while also following my own lore that I've written, which I'm going to be keeping under wraps here on YouTube for anyone who doesn't want spoilers for the audio releases. So since we have such little to work with, the only thing I had to follow is the silhouette of the upper body. I did want her to have dark skin though, and this hair does not look curly at all, so figuring out a way to marry both of those ideas together was not easy in the slightest. I did find a way to keep the silhouette and still make her hair curly though. Praise me. I kept her face mostly hidden in shadow. I will make a design of her eventually where more of her face is visible, probably, but for now this serves my purposes. I do want her to look somewhat off-putting and wrong. I want her to look like she wasn't supposed to exist, so I think all of that kind of added to that look. I know that this particular image isn't my best work, but that's not really important right now. The important part of this is the design, and I am happy with this. That's the end of the video. Merch! I have merch for an arrangement was made. Right now we have this design available as both a keychain and a pin. Each one is lovingly handcrafted by Chinese child slaves. I'm joking. These are available on Ko-fi and Etsy. Order them on Ko-fi if you can. The shipping is cheaper. I do plan to make different merch designs for an arrangement was made eventually, but for now this is all we've got. Watch or read an arrangement was made. Bye.